This video is about what to do when your book sucks. And this is kind of a difficult and challenging video to talk about because on the one hand, nobody thinks their book sucks. Nobody sets out to write a sucky book. But when you're developing a new skill, the chances are the first time you do something, it's always kind of going to suck. You're never going to do everything as well as you would in the future because you're learning the skills. Like when you're writing a book, even if you've studied everything about writing a book and you've plotted it well and you've developed your characters, the first time you write a book, that's all still a new skill. When you go through and you write the rough draft, you edit the rough draft, final proofreading, all of that stuff is the first time you've ever gone through that process of writing a book, and you're learning while you do it. So you always want to be good, but it's never going to be as good as you want it. And you won't necessarily recognize that it's not good until way later when you've developed more skills and you can see all the things that you've done wrong. So I'm going through this process now. I published a book, Orpheum, a couple of years ago, and it was only the first actual half of a book of a full novel. It kind of developed, ended on a cliffhanger. I thought it was pretty decent. I put it out there, partly because also there's this other quote in entrepreneurship, which is something like, I'm paraphrasing, but if you're not kind of embarrassed by your first product, then you were too late to launch. You were too late to market. And all that means is if you spent too much time developing it until you thought it was really great and really perfect, not only did you probably waste a lot of time, but also you haven't tested the market. So the reason that you launch quickly when you're developing a new product is because you don't want to spend valuable time and resources developing something to make it perfect if it's not going to sell very well, if people don't even really like it. So that's why I was launching quickly. I wanted to make sure anybody even liked this story. I wanted to know if I could write because I was writing fiction for the first time. And this is weird because in entrepreneurship, you launch something quickly. You launch a minimal viable product and see if anybody likes it. If people like it and the response is kind of good, they tell you what's wrong with it. They give you feedback, and then you can put out version 2 or version 3 that's better. And this doesn't quite work as well with novels. I put up a video recently talking about whether you should finish a series that's not selling very well. And my conclusion was, this is kind of difficult, but for example, this book Orpheum that I wrote, I thought it was okay, but it doesn't sell crazy well. And now in retrospect, because I've launched that book, I know why it doesn't sell, and I can write different books, different series that will sell better instead of going back and finishing that whole series. However, I still want to finish my original goal, which was just, I mapped out most of the full novel. And when I got to the first half, as often happens when you get to the middle of a book, you start to see everything that it still needs that you couldn't see at the very beginning of it. So you can't really write a whole novel all the way through. I think generally when you get to the middle, you kind of flounder around a bit and figure out why it's not working or what has to happen next to get you to the final few chapters, the epic showdown between the antagonist and protagonist, etc. So in this book that I am working on now, it's been a couple years since I published part 1, and now I'm trying to work on part 2. And that's really difficult because I've improved so much as a writer. I am going back and editing part 1, and I don't like it very much. I find that I made a lot of mistakes. I found a couple typos, which isn't really a big deal, but the main problem is story. It's just really slow, and things don't develop very quickly, and nothing really exciting happens for like the first 10 or 15 chapters. And that's a big problem. It's not terrible, but it's not going to do as well as, like, I'm also reading a lot of best-selling young adult fiction all the time to kind of figure out the difference between my books that aren't performing well and these books that are. And the main difference I've grown to understand is just most exciting young adult sci-fi or fantasy books, commercial fiction, they start off with a lot of action. So they start off with like 2 main characters who are at odds. They both have different goals, but they have to team up and work together. It's probably a romantic element. There's already, people trying to kill them or chase them down. There's already a lot of stuff going on in the first chapter. You don't start with 10 chapters of backstory. In my case, I'm doing the whole, the ordinary world, then the call to adventure, and then a transition where slowly, mysteriously, things evolve until she figures out what's actually going on. But that doesn't happen until way later. And that's not a terrible way to write a book, but it's not very engaging either. And I know I can write more exciting book. So the challenge now is that I really don't like the first half of the book, but I can't like I can't fix it. You can't fix a book that's with a broken story unless you completely rewrite it. Like I would have to find a complete new starting point for the book, and if I did that, I'd never be able to get to the end, to the midpoint, to all the stuff that I've been working on for the last 3 months. So at this point, all I can do is clean it up as best I can and finish it and get to the end. The second half is going to be a lot better and a lot stronger, a lot more satisfying. And that's good, but it doesn't really matter, because if people aren't hooked by the first 3 chapters, if they don't read the first 3 chapters and they're dying to keep reading, if it doesn't suck them in right away, it doesn't matter what happens in the 25th chapter, because people aren't going to keep reading it. So you can't necessarily fix a book that sucks unless you rewrite the whole thing, which is probably not what you want to do, because you wrote it to the best of your ability when you were working on it. It was your best effort. But if you want to go back and revise it and polish it and fix it, it could take you another year. It'd take a lot of rewriting and drafts. It'd be really difficult. It's kind of sinking into the swamp, especially because you care about it so much and you want it to be your best work. Maybe now in retrospect, it doesn't live up to what you thought it was or what you thought it could be, so you still think it has all this promise. I don't necessarily think it's a great idea to go back and heavily revise a book. I think you should go back and fix the first couple chapters. If you can, fix the first paragraph and the last paragraph of every chapter, if you can fix a couple things to make it more engaging, to make more things happen, that can have a huge impact on read through and sell through. Because if your first chapter is not hooking them, it doesn't matter anyway. So to improve, the chances that they make it to the last chapter, for example, in all my I think in my first 5 novels, I have a prologue that has some action and adventure or some violence, and then, the 15 chapters leading up to the point where something exciting happens again. And that's not a terrible way to write, but it's not a great way to write either. That's kind of a cheat. It may be better than not having anything. But really, you want to start where the story starts, and you want to start in an exciting, engaging place. So this is something I've learned, and I'm learning, you always get better. You're always going to think your previous work sucks. That's kind of part of the experience, and that should be happening, because that means you're getting better and you're realizing how to write better books, and you're realizing what mistakes you made in earlier books. It doesn't mean that those books are worthless. This book has like 100 positive reviews, and that's only on the first half that ends on a cliffhanger. So it's already not great, but most people kind of like it. I'm going to relaunch it with the second half with a more satisfying ending. So it'll have a satisfying ending, so it actually gets somewhere. I'll remarket it because, I've worked on it for a long time, and I think I can get it to make some money. It doesn't make a lot of money now, but maybe a couple $100 a month. But mostly, like, it's not selling very well because it's not a great product. But I'll put a new cover on it, spend some advertising, fix up the description a lot, which isn't so great. And I know it can make some money, but if your book really sucks, like at this point, I'll do the best I can and launch it, but that's not what I'm counting on to make money. I feel like that's a learning experience. That book kind of sucks. It's not my best work. I know that because of the mistakes I made with that book, future books are going to be much better. Future books are going to be much easier to sell. They're going to be much easier to get reviews, to stick on Amazon, because a lot of the stuff that actually matters when you're writing fiction or when you're writing commercial fiction and you're trying to make a living at it, you need to write books that sell. So you need to write books that don't suck. And that's something, you get better at from experience. I think everybody's first book or two probably isn't great. I'm happy with the amount of success I've seen with my first books, even though I think they're kind of sucky. And I'm excited about the future books that I'm going to make less sucky, because now I have learned all this stuff from launching a few early books. And that's partly why I've been launching quickly and launching, maybe it wasn't my best work, but it was a reasonably strong effort. So I'm not too embarrassed or dissatisfied or upset that my first couple of books aren't that great, because I know that they were necessary to get me to a place where I can write better books in the future. So I'm grateful that my readers, found some enjoyment from what I put out there already. And because of their loyalty, I hope to entertain them with better stories in the future. But you can't really worry about, like, the best you can do with a sucky book is learn from your mistakes and write better books in the future. I don't necessarily think you should go back and revise a whole bunch, although I've seen examples where if it's a major series, like Bella Forrest has 20 or 30 vampire books in one major series, and she's gone back and fixed book one and rewritten it basically because it's the first book in the series. It's the first book in her money-making series, and that series makes millions of dollars. So it was worth it to spend considerable effort on redoing that first book. It's partly the same story. If that first book has some potential for a best-selling series, it might be worth it to fix it up if you know the next few books in the series are going to be really valuable. But if that first book isn't selling anyway, if it doesn't get that great reviews, the best you can do is package it well and describe it well and put it out there, but maybe with a disclaimer. Like when I rewrite my autoresponder series, I'll put something in there kind of explaining how those are my first books, like to share with my audience that I know that they're not perfect, but I'm also trying to get better, because otherwise you're just, telling everybody to buy this book that you don't think is very great. So I'm already weak on sales. I don't do a lot of promotion or marketing. I'm a little too honest with what I share to my followers. But on the other hand, that lets them know that I see my own weaknesses and I'm striving to get better. So even if they like the book, hopefully I can let them know that, I'm getting better as an author and there's more better stuff coming soon. Anyway, I don't know if this video helps very much, but if it's any consolation, if you're not sure whether your book sucks or not, but you're having trouble getting people to read it or review it, that can be an indication. And it may not be, like when I talk about a book sucking, it doesn't necessarily mean the quality is poor. It could just be that you wrote a book that doesn't interest an audience. You don't have an audience who appreciates or is interested in the book that you wrote. It doesn't really mean the quality is bad. It may be beautiful writing. It's just not an engaging story, so it doesn't have commercial value, which is fine unless you want to make money with your books. And then whether or not it has commercial potential is a huge factor that you need to consider. So there's a lot of stuff like that people say, I don't write for the money, or I don't care if it makes any money. I'm just writing for myself. Or they say stuff like, if you try to write for the market, you'll be depressed or you'll hate writing, or it's like a terrible way to make a living. I don't find any of that true. I think writing is difficult and challenging, but it's the same process, whether you're writing a book that has no market and won't sell, or you're writing a book that has a market and will sell. It's the same process to plot and write and revise a book. There's not a huge difference in the two forms of writing, in the experience of writing books. The difference is whether or not you're going to make a lot of money out of it. And for me, yes, I would rather make more money with the books that I'm writing. I'd rather that more people like the books that I'm writing. Otherwise, I'm just writing for myself. And I have lots of other things that I can do for fun by myself. So writing is a relationship that I'm building with readers, and I deserve to get paid as a response for the enjoyment that I put out into the world, to the value that I create. So I'm always looking to improve the value by writing books that are more engaging to readers. So that's why, like when I say this book sucks in particular, it's because I'm trying to get better, and I recognize that I did things poorly in this book, that I like the second half of the book can't make up for the slowness of the first half of the book. I can only encourage my readers, like, please read the first half so you can get to all the good stuff in the second half. And you can't actually say that. Nobody will put up with half of a book just for the emotional payout at the end, unless they really trust the author. To some extent, if they trust you, if they know you, and they like you, and you've developed a relationship, then I can ask them to keep reading to get to the second half, and they may trust me enough to actually do that. But if you don't have an audience or a platform, people aren't going to do that for you, because you haven't proven your skill set to them yet. Anyway, so this is kind of a weird video, but I hope you find it interesting.